I'm Insomniac, and this is an Invicta S1 Rally chronograph.
Who are you?
Insomniac.
Before I dive into this review, I want to give a big shout out to Anthony for sending this in. If you watched the last, I believe it's 3 watch reviews that I've had here on the channel, those were all watches that were sent in by the same person, so definitely hit the thumbs up down below, show him some love. If you have any watches that you want to see reviewed here on the channel, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com. I will let you know where to send the watches. They'll be reviewed, insured, and sent back. Alright, let's get into the watch. The case on this watch is massive. I understand that Invicta likes to make a bold statement with a lot of their pieces, and I actually don't mind a large watch occasionally if it isn't large in every dimension, but this one is just bloated in diameter, case height, lug-to-lug length, so much so that I did something I never bothered to actually do and looked up the dimensions of the movement Invicta used for this watch because I was curious as to whether or not they had some wiggle room to maybe use this design in a more wearable and compact package. And sure enough, the movement in this watch is only 30 millimeters wide and 4 millimeters tall, so why this thing is 46 millimeters in diameter and almost 14 millimeters tall, I have no clue. The design of this case is the same basic design of all their other S1 Rally watches. Quality of the finishing on this case is actually pretty good, but I can't figure out why the entire case is polished except for the tops and bottoms of the lugs. There's really no flow to it. The screw-down case back is also polished except for the engraved design around the S1 logo, and you have various bits of information about the watch engraved around the outer edge. Last we have the chrono pushers and the crown, which are my least favorite thing about this case other than the overall size. The chrono pushers are made to look like screw-down locking pushers like you'd find on a Rolex Daytona, but the textured screw collars here are fake. They don't move. And the feel of these pushers is completely numb, very springy with zero positive feedback to indicate when the chronograph is actually engaged. That's not as bad as this crown though. The crown on this watch is, get ready for this, 12 millimeters in diameter and sticks out an additional 4 millimeters from the case, which from side to side takes this already massive 46 millimeters and turns it into 50 millimeters across the wrist. Far too wide, far too tall, and a crown that big actually has no practical purpose on this watch. So at a glance, it's not a bad looking case, but when you examine it one section at a time, it's a bit of a mess aesthetically. The dial on this piece is a lot like the case. At a glance, it's a fairly handsome chrono dial, but upon further inspection, you start to wonder what drugs somebody was on when they made some of these decisions. Now, I will concede that part of the problem of the layout that we'll talk about is the VD54 movement they chose for this piece. The main flaw of that movement being the fact that it's supposed to be a chronograph, yet the main second hand on this dial is the running second hand for the time, but they could have used a different movement. Anyway, let's get to the individual pieces here. The main meat of the dial is a nice off-white, kind of cream-colored backdrop with all black markers and accents that contrast perfectly, which, paired with the medium pizza from Domino's size, equals great legibility overall. The outermost edge of the dial has a chapter ring with printed numerals and lines on it, but here lies problem number 1. This outermost track is a 5th-second chronograph track, which is 150% useless here, and purely for design, being that, as mentioned earlier, the large second hand on this watch isn't for the chronograph. Below that track, you have the thinnest applied hour and minute markers in existence, and some more stupidity in terms of layout. You'll notice that you have numerals for every hour except 12, 6, and 9. I completely understand not having a numeral at 6. It definitely wouldn't fit with the size of that subdial down there. But how are they able to fit a 3 next to that subdial, but not a 9 next to a subdial of equal size on the other side of the dial? And why is there no 12 at the 12 o'clock position when there's ample room for a numeral there? I'm guessing it's to add some kind of continuity between the other rectangular markers, but if that was the goal, why not replace the 3 with a rectangle marker instead? Or go rectangle markers for 12, 3, 6, and 9. It just doesn't make any sense. Moving on, you have the Invicta name and logo under the 12 o'clock, then you have the subdials. More ridiculousness here, folks. Let me start by saying that I actually like the aesthetic of the larger subdial at 6, slightly overlapping the smaller subdials at 3 and 9, but that's really where the praise ends. The subdial at 3 o'clock is simple enough. It's a 24-hour indicator. The subdial at 9 o'clock counts minutes for the chronograph, but the subdial at 6 o'clock is a mess. The inner part of that subdial counts seconds for the chronograph, then the outer portion in the black is an insanely cramped tachymeter scale. Number 1, who can read that scale crammed into the edge of that subdial? Number 2, as with many chronographs, there are no individual markers between the 5s for counting individual minutes or seconds in the 2 chrono subdials. And number 3, when the hour or minute hands are anywhere between 4 and 7, it blocks enough of that main chrono dial at 6 o'clock to make it really frustrating to attempt to use. So it really is a thoughtless layout. Last but not least, we have the hands, and luckily we get to end on a good note here. The hands are polished, the minute and hour hands are semi-sword shaped hands with Lume filling, and all 3 hands are the right length for this dial and all have good sharp points, which make reading the time accurately a breeze. Overall though, this dial is pretty good at a glance, but a mess in terms of details. There are 2 usable complications on this piece. The first one is the 24-hour indicator at 3 o'clock. It's large and legible, it works. The other complication obviously is the chronograph, which is honestly borderline useless. If you watch my reviews regularly, you know that I always point out the fact that most people never use their chronograph anyway, but in the case of this watch, be sure that you have no practical use for a chronograph, because for all of the reasons I pointed out in the last section, this chronograph really is more for show than for use. Of course, where this section loses an extra point is based on the fact that of the 2 complications on this dial, the one that's barely usable is the one that takes up most of the dial and adds 2 extra buttons to the case. Here is another section, unfortunately, where I'm scratching my head, wondering what Invicta was thinking when they put this watch together. You have Lume filling inside the hour and minute hands, and to be fair, it's pretty good Lume filling. It picks up a charge pretty easily, it glows bright and even, but as you can see here, there's no other Lume filling on the dial. So basically what you have to do here to read the time in the dark with this watch is focus on which of the 2 nearly identical glowing lines is larger than the other. That's the minute hand. Then guess which hour and minute markers they're pointing to approximately based on their relative positions. Basically, the Lume on this watch is useless without any kind of reference on the dial. They would have actually been better off here just not putting any Lume on anything, because this makes no sense. Time at a glance is great on this watch. The contrast between the hands and markers against this light backdrop is excellent. The hands are perfect lengths, with the minute and second hands stretching out just shy of the minute track. You have sharp points at the ends of all those hands, and the outer edge of the dial where the minute track is really clean. There's no clutter at all, so you can quickly and easily read the time on this watch at a glance. Accuracy from this VD54 quartz movement is excellent, and for more reasons than just accurately measuring the time, which of course is most important. On top of not losing or gaining any time in the weeks that I've had this watch here, it's one of the best looking quartz movements that I've had here on the channel. The stop of the second hand is crisp and precise with no laziness or springiness, and a true rarity here on Should I Time This, the stop of the deadbeat second hand actually lands on almost every marker at the outer edge of the dial. So despite the fact that it's still ridiculous for that hand to be the running second hand rather than the second hand for the chronograph, this movement is very accurate, and it has a great quality look to it as the second hand moves around the dial. The strap that comes on the S1 series, appropriately, is a rally-style leather strap. Love it or hate it, these large vent holes are similar to what you'd see on rally and rally-style straps for decades, so aesthetically, it is correct with this piece. The tan-colored leather looks good with the light cream dial, and the brushed stainless buckle with the engraved Invicta logo is large to the point of almost being cheesy, but matches the case quite well. My issue is with the thickness and overall quality of the strap. If you go back to another Invicta S1 Rally review that I did years ago, which had basically the same strap in black, you'll hear the same complaint as the one I'm about to highlight here. The shorter side of the strap has a great thickness to it and feels firm and durable, but the longer side of the strap only starts out thick and durable, while more than half of it literally feels paper thin, creases easily, and honestly just feels cheap. So overall, it's not perfect, but it's not a bad strap, and love or hate the styling, it's aesthetically correct for a rally style chronograph. Last but not least, we have value, and as per usual, go back and watch literally any and all of my Invicta reviews, and you'll see that Invicta loves to make up these massively hilarious fake MSRPs on their website, and in this case, the website says that the MSRP of this watch is $695. But like with all Invictas, that's nowhere near what this watch actually sells for online. As of the time of this review, I found this watch brand new online for $65. And here's where it gets tricky. If you are one of the few people who wants to buy a chronograph that you might actually use once or twice or now and then or ever at all, this isn't even a good value at $65. But assuming that you're one of the 98% of watch owners who never uses the chronograph anyway, and you don't mind a watch the size of a wall clock, it's a decent looking watch with an accurate and actually very good looking movement for $65. So again, assuming that you don't mind the size and that you don't actually ever intend to use the chronograph, it's actually a pretty good value. One more big shout out to Anthony for sending this in. Thanks again, super appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe. I have plenty of new watch reviews coming to the channel soon, so you don't want to miss those. You can hit the notification button, you know, all that stuff YouTubers say all the time. You feel free to do all of that stuff too, that would be useful. Anyway, that's it until the next one. I will see you all next time.